Are you wishing all the campers a sad farewell? Are you crying tears?
You know, I was at the bus on Saturday, which was super fun because there were tears. Like, kids are like, I don't want to go home.
Yeah.
You know, which could be sad in some cases. Like, you don't want to send kids out into a world that's not ready for them. But, yeah, it does feel a little sad. Summer's coming to an end. I always sort of wake up and I'm like, dang, I forgot to, like, enjoy summer again.
Like, whoops, it just passed me by.
It goes so fast.
You got to put on your to-do list next year.
Yeah.
Enjoy summer.
Yeah, and figure out what that means for sure.
No, this year I feel like summer, in many ways, I feel like summer just started. Weather-wise, like I really only feel like in the last week have we had sort of maybe even a couple weeks, but like I don't know, we had a rainstorm last weekend,
right?
And it's been
a lot of rain, the second most rain in 2019.
Yeah, and that day alone made it the rainiest August in history.
Just that day.
Like, and it's been gloomy and
don't ever
dreary.
think you can not make a difference in one day.
No, that day, that 0.8 inches of rain is all it took. Because normally there's not supposed to be any rain.
Yeah, that's what they say.
This is the contract between me and Oregon, right? I endure 10 months of gloom and darkness, and in exchange, I get 9 weeks of perfect, uninterrupted sunshine.
Yeah.
And I just feel like Oregon has violated that contract this year. And I'm not happy about it. And I'm planning to file a grievance.
What are you going to do about that?
Oh, there will be consequences. Don't you
file
worry.
A grievance.
Like,
do you send that to the governor or like, who are you sending that to?
You know, probably a lot of people. Currently, I'm sending it to everybody listening to XRAY. Like just putting it out into the world.
Tens of thousands of people listening right now know that Oregon's on notice.
I'm not happy about it.
Who's going to tell Oregon though?
If we could work on a little more global warming, that would be great. So, build that freeway and just like, let's warm it just another 5 or 10 degrees and that'll be perfect.
Back to our big pressing question about whether to date someone with the same first name. Does it matter if it's spelled differently?
No.
Colin 1 L, Colin 2 L's?
Not at all. Well, except that you should never date someone who's Colin with 2 L's because that's atrocious. But
because you are Colin with 1 L.
Well, yes, because
there's only one way.
1 L is the correct way to spell the name. I mean, do you support Emily with 2 M's?
I've never seen an Emily with 2 M's.
Because it's wrong.
I don't think that's up for me to decide. It's not my child. It's not my... Anyways, we've got lots of news to talk about. And oh my goodness, we've got quite a rundown here.
Yeah,
It's not boring to hit.
No. But I want to start... with 2020.
All right. No disagreement there.
Yeah, it was like, I feel like that's always a good place to start. It centers us on the world ahead. And with the end of summer coming, that really means we're a year from the general election. Right? Like this is sort of peak. Like,
I have to keep reminding myself how this all happens. I mean, it feels like it's forever, right? But then February 3rd, you got the first caucus in Iowa. Then following week's New Hampshire, so things speed up pretty fast. And then November, we got an election.
You might recall that 9 months ago, I was very opposed to talking about 2020.
But you're still opposed to going to, see a presidential candidate, right? You're not quite ready to go
I'm still a little bit like, it's still very early. If they're showing up in Oregon in, March, then I'll pay some attention. Okay, you care. At this point, they're just raising money.
I'm so glad, though, in retrospect, 2007, 2008, that I grabbed an opportunity to see Obama before the 50,000 person rally that happened.
That's true.
Yeah. So I get to see him in smaller venues in Oregon before the big one on the waterfront.
Maybe if one... Well, I was going to say if one of the front runners, but I don't really like most of the front runners. And so I was like, maybe, well, yeah, that's fair.
So what's our 2020 news? What do you want to share?
Hickenlooper dropped out.
I was surprised.
I was surprised too. I thought he had more staying power. Not that he was ever going to win, but it just seemed like he was sort of, as of the last debate, he seemed very in it and the last debate is when I realized that he was running. So totally missed.
Just realized.
Totally missed him on the first round. It was kind of the nice thing about the second round of debates is that there were a bunch of people that I had totally glossed over the first time, and I spent most of the one night going. Every time they showed, I think it was Delaney. I was like, no, it wasn't Delaney. It was Bennett. Every time they showed Bennett, I was like, who is that? And then
Where did he come from?
Put the little chyron, and I was like, oh. And it happened multiple times. Oh. I just can't. These, like, white guys of the same age, like, they start to blur together for me. I, like, can't keep track. Like, I'm just like, Bennett, Ryan, Delaney.
Is Hickenlooper the brewery owner?
Yes, Hickenlooper's a little more distinctive. He's former Colorado governor, brewery owner.
Or something else, like he's a blacksmith or something.
Yeah, he seems like...
I would love to pick my chyron. Like, what would you say? Colin Jones won't date other Collins and refuses...
Confused why he's here. Like, this must be a mistake.
Yeah.
I like, there was so the Atlantic, I think about this all the time. A couple years ago, they did this piece on, like, what is power? And...
What is power?
Yeah. And so they tried to quantify it, and they tried to sort of say, okay, here's here's some metrics for political power. And so, like, money is definitely a piece of it. And sort of influence in the world is a piece of it. Your ability, like, so they did all these things, and you got, like, various points for them, and then you sort of added up your power score. And so, like, one of them was like, can you bring together in a week, how many people could you bring together?
That's interesting.
Like, is it, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000? Right? Like, your ability to mobilize people. They did, like, could you bring, like, can you, like, summon an armed force? And can you do, and then, like, you get extra points if you could do so legally.
Oh my gosh.
Like, and so they compared it to, like, some of the militia stuff in Southern Oregon at the time.
I mean, Daenerys Targaryen, she's, like, top of the list,
right, exactly.
Man. She's got Dothraki.
Yeah, and one of the things, it was one of the smaller items, but, like, it was,
or
like...
dragons on the list?
There were no dragons on the list, surprisingly.
I could summon dragons. Does that count?
No points for that.
Darn it.
But one of the questions they asked was, what, if you were written about in a newspaper, how would they write your name? Right? Like, would it simply be Emily Gilliland? And that's it, because, of course, everyone knows who you are. And that was, like, the most points. And then I think it was, like, writer, Emily Gilliland.
You gotta qualify.
And then it was... Emily Gilliland, a writer. Right? Like, it's sort of like... Because you see that, right? Like, it's not, like... Ursula Le Guin, a writer. Right, like there's
Toni Morrison, no qualifier.
Right.
Cher doesn't even need a last name.
Exactly. And so I love that idea of, like, who, how you're described in, like, a newspaper article if you're quoted. And I got quoted in the East Oregonian recently, and it was a tweet by Colin Jones, past president of City Club, and I was like, okay, I can work with that. Like, that runs.
I love it. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's fast. It's worth, like, Googling. I mean, it's like Atlantic, like, calculating power or something like that, and it sort of ranks different people, and they're really clear. They talk about how, like, money's exponential, right? Like, the difference between $1 million and $100 million in wealth, right? Like, is it's a more than 100-fold increase in your ability to influence political processes. Like,
yeah, right.
They talk about, you get points for, like, have you developed an idea that became legislation or a Supreme Court ruling? Do you have the ability to reward friends and punish enemies? Like, right? Like, it's kind of this wild...
Back to dragons.
Yeah, it's true. If you have a dragon, you can take those 10 points. So it's definitely worth checking out.
Well, speaking of 2020, we've heard Hickenlooper is dropping out. Beto O'Rourke has said...
Not dropping out.
He will not be dropping out to run for Senate.
Despite all of the encouragement.
El Paso needs him.
But needs him in D.C.
In that particular... Right.
Yeah. Needs him... somewhere else.
In a different building in D.C., not the Senate building.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not the Senate building. True.
Yeah, totally. I'm so grateful for such great coverage of 2020. at our fingertips. I've been listening to lots of podcasts. Really interesting podcast, not article, podcast on Atlantic interviews with Andrew Yang this week. And he's one that we don't talk a lot about, but he is actually qualified for the September debates. So the next round of debates, a little bit more narrow. You have to have 130,000 unique donors. You have to reach 2% in 4 polls. So a little bit more stringent requirements, but Andrew Yang's going to be on that stage. So right now for September, this is as of August 8th, so could have changed, but we've got Biden, Booker, Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Andrew Yang. So we've got
all the Bs.
9 folks who've qualified.
That's a really lovely number.
That's just one night, right? Like of this point. So one more, and you got one night. Hopefully, they'll still do.
I hope they add one. I hope one more person qualifies, and they still split it into 2 nights.
That would be great. I think a little bit longer form will be important.
Yeah, I both, on one hand, the fact that Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden haven't been on stage together is very strange to me. Yeah. But on the other hand, I just need more from people. They just, if you're at the bottom, I think the advantage for the format that we've used is that someone like Booker has gotten far more airtime than if you had put 20 candidates on one stage, right? Because he sort of then becomes a near top candidate out of 10, as opposed to I think he would have sort of gotten lost in a larger group. And so there's some advantage, right, for those sort of what I would call mid-tier outside the top 5, but still very in it. They've gotten a lot more traction, I think, where otherwise I think those top 5 would have sucked up all the air. When you split it, that's sort of the gain. Certainly someone like Williamson or Yang is getting way more traction than they would have on a stage of 20. But
yeah,
I also am like, yeah, but if they only get 2 minutes, what's the point?
Another interesting read or listen, Crooked Media, which is a group of folks that came out of the Obama administration. They have podcasts like Pod Save the People, which is one of my favorite, Pod Save the World, Pod Save America. They have a new polling relationship, and they did a really interesting poll in Wisconsin. Because a lot of folks are saying that for the Dems to win the 2020 presidential election, they have to win Wisconsin. And so Crooked Media went in and did a really interesting poll with voters in Wisconsin, mostly just testing messages.
Oh, sure.
And so then they've rolled that up into sort of a messaging memo that they're sharing with candidates. But on Pod Save America, they summarized it in yesterday's episode, but then it's also on crooked.com, so it's another thing to catch. A little bit of in-depth research about Wisconsin and how folks are feeling. In Wisconsin, Trump still has higher than the national average approval ratings, especially on the economy. So
for the president,
for Trump's approval ratings in Wisconsin is higher than the national average, and especially high on the economy. So Wisconsin hasn't been feeling, or at least the poll is not showing the pain that is happening to farmers, as an example, hitting Trump's approval ratings.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Do we want to bring Tom into the conversation?
I think we have to and should and need to.
We
Absolutely.
Must. We must.
It's time for Talk Media News, made possible by our sponsor, Beth Ernest and Associates Real Estate. Beth Ernest's team of real estate brokers have been serving the Portland area for over 22 years, specializing in residential real estate, lots, and land. More at BethErnest.com. We're pleased to welcome Tom Squitieri. Talk Media News, TalkMediaNews.com. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. How are you doing today on this Friday?
We're doing pretty well. We have a really important question to ask you, and that is, would you date someone with the same first name that you have?
I have.
Oh, there you go. So you would approve.
So I guess that's a yes, right?
But would you do it again? Because my point was, I've done it as well, and I would not repeat that. That was an error.
Well, it was interesting because, to me, one of the advantages of it is the never-ending cute moment when you're at a party or at dinner and someone calls out your name and you both turn together as if one.
That is
and
great.
I feel a poem coming. Watch out.
Oh, yeah.
What are you covering this morning, Tom? What do you want to talk about?
Well, there's a lot of fun things going on in the world.
Right.
The most fun one is that President Trump wants to buy Greenland. You know,
is it on sale?
Wait, yeah, tell me more. Like,
no, it's not
Greenland,
on sale.
the country?
One thing we've learned about the president, whether you like him or not, he likes to muse and think out loud, for better or worse.
Lucky for us.
And he's done this in conversations with members of Congress and his staff that he wants to think we should consider buying Greenland. Now, to the president's credit, President Harry Truman did offer Denmark a sum of money to buy Greenland after World War II, recognizing then the strategic location of Greenland. The reasons President Trump is thinking about making an offer remain unclear, and Danish officials haven't commented yet on this, but it's an interesting idea. The Chinese are also another suitor for Greenland. They're doing it piecemeal, the way they tend to do things. They want to buy assets already in Greenland to sort of get an economic stranglehold on it. Greenland's interesting to a lot of countries because of its strategic location. With the ice melting, the Northwest Passage becomes a reality, and there are a lot of minerals in Greenland as well that are now more easily accessible, although not that easily, but more easily accessible because of the sad fact of the ice melting.
So is this like a real thing that could happen? Are we buying Greenland?
No, it's not. I will give you a 99% no on that, because anything can happen. But Denmark's not interested in selling Greenland. The people who live on Greenland aren't interested in becoming part of the United States or any other country. They want to be independent, if anything else. So I don't think it's going to happen.
All right. What else is going on in the world?
Well, the other thing that's going on in the world is the Army had a very interesting mixer for reporters last night, off the record on background. And it was a way to sort of reintroduce themselves with the new leaders to the Pentagon reporters. It was actually a very nice thing. And during the conversation with a lot of these guys and women, they said they're more optimistic that the Taliban is going to come to the peace table than it may seem in the media, that we're taking it to them. As one said, that's not my quote, meaning militarily, and the Taliban recognizes the fact that they have to have a peace deal with the West in order to keep the money coming to Afghanistan, which they would need to have in a peacetime. You understand what I'm saying? So everyone thinks, the United States military is going to pull out and the Taliban will run roughshod over the Kabul government, and that takes care of that. That's all possible to happen. But if they do, the Taliban is not going to get outside Western aid and investment, which they seek. I thought that was a very interesting element to the whole quagmire of options and possibilities in Afghanistan. The other interesting thing to me, to which they said a couple times, was there's this whole battle, which we've reported on, between the Taliban and ISIS in Afghanistan. The Taliban doesn't want ISIS, and they equated it to the Jets versus the Sharks. They didn't say who was who. But, in other words, it was almost like a street fight between these two terrorist groups. You want to go back to Greenland?
Yeah, well, it's funny because my brain was still on Greenland, if I'm being honest, and I was particularly drawn in by the quotes from the Prime Minister, who said it has
you found some?
Oh, yeah. So his comment was, it has to be an April Fool's joke. And the foreign affairs spokesman for the Danish People's Party said, if he is truly, referring to Donald Trump, if he is truly contemplating this, then this is final proof that he has gone mad.
Boy.
And finally, Greenland's foreign minister said, Greenland's foreign minister said, we are open for business, but we are not for sale. So that's some pretty choice.
That's probably the line. That's probably the most line with resolute to Donald Trump, i.e. the real estate person.
Yeah, exactly. Like, feel free to come spend money, but we're not selling. So some we know where their head's at least. If we can't always figure out where the Taliban's head is at.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Anything else you're covering you want to share with our listeners, Tom?
I think we should leave it at Greenland on an up note. Fridays.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You too. Thanks so much. Bye. Talk Media News segment brought to you by Beth Ernest and Associates Real Estate. Lots of land at BethErnest.com. Thanks to Tom Squitieri for joining us this morning. TalkMediaNews.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more news. This is X-Ray Radio. Radio is yours.